Up next, Heroes of the Storm Deep Dive.
I see you. Hello, Blizzcon. You guys look awesome this Sunday morning. I look awesome. No, I do want to apologize for my attire. I don't normally dress this way, kind of double teaming the HGC stage, but yeah, thank you for being here. It is an absolute honor for myself and my colleagues to stand in front of you to represent the Heroes dev team. You know, making games is really, really complicated and extremely collaborative, so everything we get to talk to you about today is really representative of a much larger, passionately committed dev team. So, just wanted to say that up front. Also, quick shout out to Johnny Waterman. I don't know if you're here, Johnny. Johnny, you're somewhere. Incredible artist who helped us put together this PowerPoint today, so thank you, Johnny, for all your hard work in that. All right, let's talk about Orphea. Ever since the launch of the game, we've always wanted to bring a hero from the Nexus into the game, and for many reasons, we felt like this year was the right time to do it. I know there are a lot of questions out there about that, but I'd like to speak to it specifically. You know, this year marked the occasion of us bringing in the last major Blizzard franchise into the game with the Alterac Pass Battleground, Warcraft themed, of course. And in the wake of that milestone, we really felt like creating a Nexus hero was both a fitting creative challenge for us, while also serving as a great opportunity to shore up the individual and specific identity of Heroes of the Storm as a standalone game. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit to you today about this character's background from both a dev perspective as well as her in-game character story. And then I'm going to pass it off to Lana, Kyle, and Alex to talk a bit more about how all that relates to her in-game art design, her game design, and her various playstyles that you'll find if you've played her on the show floor. All right, let's start things off by talking about how Orphea takes us back to our roots. How many of you played Heroes all the way back in Tech Alpha? We got some OGs in the house. Do you remember this screen? It's like total blast from the past, right? It's crazy. Well, those of you that have played the game for a long time have known that Heroes has always been a game that's had a strong mix of original fantasy ideas, non-traditional fantasy ideas, while also serving as that home for that Blizzard crossover fantasy that we all know and love. You know, when the game initially launched, our first 8 battlegrounds were all non-traditional Blizzard fantasies, brand new. And, you know, we love this. And when thinking about creating a Nexus-born hero, we wanted to go back here. We had created a lot of really cool and awesome characters here. Characters like Blackheart, or Nethys, the Spider Queen, Ka, Reyna, the Lady of Thorns, and her sister, Lady Nightshade. But there was one character in particular that stood out. It may have been his, you know, humorous narcissism, that arrogance in Cursed Hollow, maybe even this background key art by Peter Lee. Very evocative. You know him as the Raven Lord. Or we might call him the Realm Lord of Ravencourt. But I am getting a little bit of my head of myself there, because not only is Orphea a return to our roots, but she's also entirely new. You know, when we began to seriously discussing the idea of a Nexus-born hero, probably a little over a year ago, we knew that it was going to present some unique opportunities and challenges. Where does this character come from? How exactly do we introduce a new character, a Blizzard character, in a way that would allow them to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Kerrigans and the Thralls of the Nexus? What even is the Nexus, right? So as you can see, we knew there were a lot of conversations to be had and discussions to sort of get through in order to introduce a new character worthy of joining the Blizzard roster. And these conversations weren't just about the character themselves, but about where this character was coming from. We did have one starting point, though. For some reason, we were extremely attracted to this phrase, the Raven Lord's daughter. But even so, what does that mean? Who exactly is the Raven Lord? We know he has this ability to become this spectral raven, right? But what does it mean? Who is he, and what does it mean to be his daughter? Early on in our process, we passed these ideas, the ones that we were aligned around, off to our art team to see what they would come up with. And they produced this amazing piece of concept art by Oscar Vega. So cool. We loved it. The silhouette was incredible, but it presented so many new questions. What's up with this box on her back? And this monster, where is it coming from? We had a lot of work to do to unearth this character's story. In fact, we had a lot to do in regards to story in general to help explain how we perceived the Nexus and the characters that filled it. You know, internally on the dev team, we've been defining rules and plans to approach the Nexus more narratively for years now, but we needed to catch the world up on how we viewed things and how it all worked together, and we needed to get it all done before we introduced Orphea to the public. So we set about to introduce a narrative across 2018 that would both set up the fundamental rules of the Nexus as a place and help set up the character of Orphea within that world. In short, we set out to do this. It was an ambitious plan. Maybe even an overly ambitious plan, but that's kind of the hero's way. We like to tackle big challenges. And there's obviously a lot to talk about in a slide like this one, but all in, we really needed to kick this whole plan off and set it in motion before we really knew who the character was, what her abilities were gonna be. You know, a Blizzcon cinematic like the one you saw in opening ceremonies, it can take over a full calendar year to create. So we really had no time to lose. And all this to say, basically, that the process of making Orphea was extremely collaborative across game design, story development, cinematic development, comic scripting, art. It all happened in real time across the year. All right. I want to take the next portion of my time here to talk a little bit about Orphea's character story, as it'll be relevant to everything my colleagues will share with you in just a moment. And I want to start with a few words concerning the nature of the Nexus itself. The Nexus is a universe of universes. It is a stable anomaly at the center of a cosmic, chaotic storm of potential. The potential energy of the storm is stored up into realms, some more stable and some older than others. These realms can be controlled, and for lack of a better word, lorded over by individuals. These realm lords are basically the demigods of the Nexus, with access to and control of the heart of their realm. We call it a singularity. This singularity represents the health, well-being, and life of the realm that it's tied to, but it also opens up the opportunity to delve deeper into the mysteries of the Nexus itself, should its possessor wish to do so. Now, Orphea is the daughter of a realm lord. Her ancestry represents the long-standing lordship over one of the oldest realms in the Nexus, Ravencourt. The current realm lord being her father, Oberon, or as you know him, the Raven Lord. So in short, Orphea is a member of a royal bloodline, and specifically the only child of an extremely powerful and somewhat mysterious man that has been plumbing the depths of Nexus knowledge for the majority of her life. She had a lonely upbringing as an only child, but her one solace was a strong connection to the magic of her ancestry. Though untutored and wild, this connection was incredibly powerful. This was her comfort. This was her grounding. This was where she felt the true meaning of home. Now, as we've mentioned previously, Orphea is a true Nexus-born hero. She lived her whole life in the Nexus, and her path to becoming a hero was incredibly personal, and it was an introspective journey. She has watched her father on his campaign of power, his progression of power, become more and more withdrawn and consumed by his studies. A bit of new information for those that have been following this story. Orphea's mother, Aline, she left the family when Orphea was very young, disturbed by the dark turn she saw in Oberon. As a small child, Orphea felt a stronger connection with her father and remained by his side, but as she grew older, she too began to fear the interests of Oberon. Interests centered around a forbidden power known as the Dark Nexus. It was this interest that ate away at what remained of Orphea's family. Following her mother's departure, Orphea made her father promise never to tap into this power. She knew that even if the mere potential of it was enough to drive her mother away, then it must truly be something to fear indeed. But as fate would have it, the Raven Lord moved closer and closer to these mysteries, prompting Orphea to run away. taking with her the one source of comfort she had in a particular relic of her family. Soon after, the Raven Lord would unleash the Dark Nexus and set himself on a campaign of control and power that he deemed necessary to save the Nexus from a far greater threat. Through a chance encounter with Deckard Cain, Orphea sought refuge in the neighboring realm of King's Crest. This is home of Dragonshire and the Garden of Terror. It's also ruled by Rhaena, the Lady of Thorns. It was here that Orphea witnessed firsthand the horror of her father's arrogance as she watched the realm of King's Crest fall to his ambitions. Orphea knew she may be the only person in the Nexus capable of talking her father off his crusade, growing ever more concerned for his dark path. But as you know, if you watched the cinematic from opening ceremonies, the Raven Lord was not interested in conversation. He's a prideful man. Rather than acquiesce to her father's wishes, Orphea stood her ground. She fought back, forever changing her fate and establishing herself as a hero of the Nexus. Of course, if you'd like to learn more about Orphea's story, you can check out our dedicated webpage produced by our talented, very talented web team, or the 4-comic series that we spoke about briefly earlier. That 4th issue will be coming just prior to Orphea's live launch in the live game. Lots of lives there. So please stay tuned for that. We're really looking forward to both telling you a bit more of Orphea's backstory with this issue while also closing out this year's storyline. All right. Now I would like to invite up the talented Lana Wyszynski to talk a bit about how all this relates to Orphea's in-game art design. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Before I begin, has anyone tried Orphea yet this weekend? You guys are going to have a little bit more insight into where we ended up, but I'm very excited to share with you a little bit about how we got there. And it all started here. This is one of my favorite pictures of Orphea. It's also her debut piece of concept art. So when the team saw this image, we didn't know her name, we certainly didn't know her abilities, and aside from knowing she's the Raven Lord's daughter, she was essentially a mystery to us. And yet, this still rings true as Orphea today, despite this being the earliest piece of her development puzzle. Which speaks, of course, to the commitment of the team, which is something I'm very proud of, but ultimately to the strength of character she exudes in this single image. My name is Lana Wyszynski. I am a senior animator on the Heroes of the Storm team, and I have the privilege of sharing with you today about how the art team brought Orphea into the Nexus. It may not look like much, but what comes between this concept image on the left and this final in-game image on the right is chaos. Or at least it's very chaotic. We were creating a brand new hero, which is an opportunity not typically afforded to us working on a game like Heroes of the Storm. Most Blizzard characters arrive in the Nexus with a strong sense of identity. Chromie needs to feel cute and confused. Jimmy needs to give him some pepper. Creating Orphea was thrilling. We're creating something entirely new, something truly ours, something substantial and playable, and as Kevin just mentioned, born of the Nexus. However, it was also a challenge because she still had to feel familiar. She had to belong in this world while being unique enough to be fresh, and most importantly, awesome enough to warrant a place on our hero roster. Not to mention there were multiple teams, like for the comics and the trailer, who had to wait to see what we created before their work could even begin, which added a lot of pressure to our process. Starting from nothing isn't always liberating. It can feel very oppressive. Suddenly, this amazing blob monster that we have that can be anything we want is, oh my God, just a blob. That can be, I don't know, anything. So what do? Well, we build a foundation for ourselves. We find structure for the character, add rules to how she's able to interact with the rest of the established world. We ask questions like, how much of the magic is Orphea's versus drawn from the relic? What are the limitations to what this relic power can become? How many teeth are too many teeth? Answering these questions for the game design helps to inform the lore, and piecing together the lore informs and inspires the art, which in turn feeds back into the visual development for both the comics and the trailer. In the end, what helped our team the most is when we stopped thinking of Orphea and the monster as two separate pieces. Rather than seeing Orphea or her monster, we realized that this dark ancient magic is actually an extension of Orphea's power. So if I were to hold on to this relic, for example, we might see radiant beams of sunshine. But for Orphea, this is a look into her depths and her personality. The relic affords her power, but how it manifests is an amplification of Orphea's own feelings. So how do we translate this concept visually into a playable kit? Luckily, despite hearty amounts of exploration over the course of many months of work, there was one ability that stuck to the team right from the very beginning called Chomp. I'm going to let Kyle get into the specifics of this ability in just a few minutes, but the inspiration for Chomp was pretty straightforward. If we've got a giant monster to work with, it's going to take a bite out of something. Even from paper design, Kyle's pitch was so visceral, I could immediately picture this ability. So much so that I was already drawing on my copy of the pitch before he'd finished giving it. She would summon this giant set of teeth around her and slam them down in front of her, effectively chomping her enemies. I pitched these visuals to the team, and although these sketches are crappy, we agreed to move forward with a prototype. Working with one of our amazing character artists, Vadim Lamar, we fleshed out this temp model for Chomp, or as we lovingly came to know them, the dentures, and moved forward into prototype animation. This example is 4 animations that I stitched together and partially keyed in the editor, which is the idle, the cast, the rebound, and the return to idle. I pulled that explosion effects from Sylvanas to make it sing, and this hit home for the team. This being the first time we saw Orphea in motion, we agreed this hit the right intensity, Orphea's confidence, that power pose, and the energy of the monster's impact driving her backward. We could even feel a bit of the relationship between the two of them, where Orphea's in enough control of the dark magic to have it do her bidding, but not really aware of her own empowered strength. This example is our effects team's first pass at all of her early abilities to Orphify them. You can see Chomp is in the bottom left-hand corner. And if you've played her already, you can see how far we've come from here. We also ended up pulling the knockback out of Chomp from the base kit. Alex is going to dive into that more in just a few minutes. This temp work read super well in a vacuum, but as soon as we started play testing, she felt very detached from her abilities. We have this spry, youthful character and these dark, heavy effects. People are asking, why aren't we just making a monster hero? What is the point of Orphea aside from just being a relic holder? That is where our tandem development and a collaborative environment really paid off. The amazing team working on putting together the trailer you saw at opening ceremonies was doing some visual exploration of their own, riffing on our initial prototypes of the relic magic, and they returned with these. So badass and chaotic, it has a touch of heat. We were super inspired. It spoke so much more to a relationship we felt was missing from the strictly purple vibe we had going on before, and we started to consider all of Orphea's magic as a gradient. The chaos would still have these deep violet tones, but now we have beautiful contrast with the striking magenta heat of Orphea's magic at the core of everything, the power behind the power. So, after all is said and done, and with a little bit of wavy hands cooking show magic, this is Chomp today. Once we had our visual pillars locked in, creating the rest of her kit was less of a fight and more finesse, but we still had regular check-ins, making sure we were locking down on clear silhouettes for readability, that dark, seething chaos of the relic magic, and of course, the heat of Orphea at the heart of it all. Once we have gameplay locked in, there's still another challenge left for the art team to face, which is establishing Orphea's character. We spent so much time discovering this hero, learning everything that we could about her. It was important to us that she had her time to shine as well. It can be easy to get distracted by how amazing it feels to violently gnash your enemies to death with rage magic, but Orphea is a unique individual with thoughts and feelings and motivations, and so we took the time to make sure those permeated the spaces in between. In one of Orphea's earliest iterations, she was described as dancer-like. And while she didn't end up in any actual ballet gear, we love the visual of taking a bite out of someone's health bar and then pirouetting away. There's something about the fury and the grace, that brutal elegance was something we really tried to hold on to while we designed her kit. There was also a lot of debate about the weight of the relic she was carrying. Can she actually walk with that, or does she keep herself magically afloat out of necessity? Keeping this idea of dancer in mind, I thought it was important she be as versatile as possible, yet always staying light on her feet. Being raised in the upper echelons of Ravencourt, it's important she is naturally quite poised, but she's also a realm lord's daughter. We have to make sure that it's clear that hoisting this relic around all the time is really nothing to her. She's carrying the weight of her lineage on her back in a large ancient vessel, and yet can still bound effortlessly into battle. And of course, descend elegantly back to her feet. Being young, Orphea's got her own idols, and so she's going to dance like a teen pop celebrity. And also being young, maybe she's got a bit of attitude. You know, dad's being a jerk. She runs away from home. We've all gone through a phase. She's coming into the Nexus with a hearty amount of that youthful sass. This guy takes his job a little too seriously. Being an animation nerd myself, I would love to go through her kit piece by piece and detail the specifics of what it took to bring out Orphea's character through gameplay, but I animated just about 100 animations for Orphea, and this panel actually has limited time, so I'm only going to show you one more, which is Orphea's hearth. It's the last piece of her kit I animated, and it is, at least to me, a culmination of everything I learned while working on her. It has zippy, graceful movement, and Orphea acting in sync with the monster, but it's a quieter moment we don't really get to see anywhere else. Orphea's kit takes a really visceral look at the fury and the power she has stored up inside her, but this is Orphea taking a look at herself, seeing the darkest parts, and ultimately finding acceptance. Take a look for yourself on the show floor. I'm going to pass it off to the amazing Kyle Dates. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lana. How's it going, guys? So I'm super excited to finally be up here and be able to talk to you guys about how we took all those great ideas that you just heard for Orphea's character and turned them into a playable hero in the game that you can play today. My name is Kyle Dates. I'm a senior game designer on the Heroes team, and I'm the hero designer for Orphea. So normally when we get up here, we talk about how we take the fantasy of a hero from the game that they're from, such as World of Warcraft or StarCraft, and bring them over into Heroes. But Orphea gave us this unique opportunity to actually create a hero with no obligations to fantasy, which was super exciting for us. Now, fantasy is super important because it's what actually makes you feel like you're playing that character when you're in the game. When we brought Ragnaros over, for example, it was extremely important to feel like you were that same Fire Lord from Molten Core, swinging Sulphurus around and wiping raids. But how do we build Orphea's fantasy? First, we take a look at some of the things that we already know about her. We know that she's Nexus born. We know that she's the graceful and intelligent daughter of a realm lord. And she has some knowledge of magic herself. She also carries around a powerful relic that's filled with a dark magic. And she's going to use that relic to enhance her own magic. Once we know who Orphea is, we can begin to build a list of goals for her that we want to achieve in the gameplay. And goals are extremely important when we're developing a hero because they are what define what a hero can or cannot do, or in some cases, what they should not do. So for Orphea, since she is our first Nexus-born hero, we want to make sure she's approachable for players of all skill levels. And so in order to do that, we're going to make her a ranged assassin. Ranged assassins typically have a softer learning curve, but they also offer that high mastery curve that allows you to continually get better as you play more. And we have a lot of ranged assassins in the game, so in order to make her feel a little bit more unique and different amongst all of them, we thought it would be really cool if she had some sources of strong self-sustain to allow her to stay healthy throughout fights. Once we have a list of goals for the character, we can begin to build her base kit. So for Orphea, I'm first going to start talking about her trait, but her trait was actually one of the last pieces of her kit that we developed. As we were working through her base kit, we iterated constantly on her trait, but the same common goals were found throughout all the different ideas that we tried. The first of these goals was that this is her source of sustain. We wanted the trait to be that unique mechanic that she was bringing to the table. In addition, we obviously wanted it to be fun and engaging for the players, but we wanted it to be something that's more passive, because as we add active abilities to a hero, it increases the complexity of the hero and makes them more difficult to play. So with those goals in mind, what we finally ended up landing on was Overflowing Chaos. As Orphea deals damage to heroes with her basic abilities, the chaotic magic within the relic intensifies, and when she basic attacks a hero, she unleashes this magic almost unaware of her own strength, dealing increased damage and healing herself for the damage dealt. This trait had a lot of things going for it once we started playing with it that we really liked. It was her primary source of sustain, and it also allowed her to stay healthy throughout fights while dealing increased damage to enemies. In addition to that, as you get better at playing Orphea, you begin to find moments where you can hit heroes, multiple heroes at once with your abilities, and then you start to find ways to spin that chaos on the most threatening heroes. And this actually created a really cool basic attack weaving gameplay style that felt super fun and engaging, despite the ability being a passive. So next up, we have Orphea's Q ability and my personal favorite ability, Shadow Waltz. After a small delay, Orphea deals damage to all enemies in a line in front of herself. If she hits a hero, she gets a cooldown reduction, and she automatically dashes a short distance as soon as she moves. Early concept art of the Ravenlord's daughter portrayed her as a dancer of sorts, and so I wanted to enable the opportunity for graceful motion in her gameplay. This is a common thread that you'll see in her talents, which Alex is going to be talking about shortly. Now, we've heard your feedback about mobility, and we're careful about the ways that we add mobility to the game. We knew that in order to be a dancer, we needed mobility, but making sure there was counterplay for the enemies was extremely important to us as we worked on Orphea. Conditional mobility is the main consideration that we had when building Shadow Waltz. It's mobility that is granted as a reward for fulfilling a condition. Orphea must hit a hero with Shadow Waltz in order to gain the mobility, which gives enemies an opportunity to dash out of the way, dodge out of the way, or interrupt her cast. Once it felt satisfying, not only for the Orphea player, but also for her enemies, we knew we landed in a good place, and we moved on. Now, once we started playing with this ability, it was extremely fun. The team loved it. The low cooldown created a trait fueling machine where she's continuously gaining chaos to stay healthy throughout the fights, and then she's using that chaos to stay healthy and dashing out of the way of the more powerful AoE effects with the mobility that she gets. This brings us to Orphea's second basic ability, which is Chomp. You heard Lana talk about this a little bit earlier, so let's dive right in and take a look. Orphea materializes a vicious maw around herself that slams down on enemies in front of her, dealing heavy damage. The concept art that you saw earlier showed off this super awesome monster that we just knew we had to use as a part of her base kit. Once we got it in the game and we were testing it, it felt like a super awesome fantasy moment, and the big delay before the damage made it feel extremely satisfying and visceral to land. Combined with her Q, her kit was starting to feel amazing. A typical playtest had Orphea dashing around the edges of a fight with Shadow Waltz before dashing in on an unsuspecting enemy and sealing the deal with Chomp. When you finally hit with this ability, you really feel like you earned it, and your enemies should too. This brings us to Orphea's last piece of her base kit, which is her E ability, Dread. Orphea releases a wave of dark magic that deals damage to all enemies that it passes through, and at the end of its path, it violently erupts after a small delay, dealing increased damage and also slowing enemies in the area. Dread was another piece of Orphea's base kit, like her trait, that we iterated on heavily throughout her development. Initially, the delay was at the beginning, which helped to match the theme of her other abilities having delays, but in testing, we found that it was just a little bit too difficult to use. So we made a simple change, and we took the delay from the beginning of the ability and changed it to be at the end of the ability. And this felt much better to us, and actually allowed Orphea to more reliably gain chaos from her trait. So as we built out her base kit, we knew in the back of our minds that we really needed some epic moments for the monster within Orphea to be unleashed. And it made a lot of sense to us for these moments to be reserved for the heroics, as this is where we see Orphea's true potential. So with that said, her first heroic ability is Eternal Feast. Orphea unleashes the monster within herself, dealing damage to all enemies in an area. If a hero is hit, the ability repeats itself again and again and again and again until either all the heroes in the area are dead or they fleed from the area entirely. And this heroic really feels like Orphea is unleashing her inner rage on her foes. Once we started using it, it was super fun for us, and it felt like an epic monster moment, not only for Orphea and her allies, but also for her enemies. It forces them to scatter from the area, which opens them up to being picked off as they flee, or being devoured if they don't. For the second heroic, we knew we wanted to still use the monster, but we wanted it to feel just as epic as the first. Initially, we tried an idea very similar to Eternal Feast, except that instead of repeating forever, the monster would grow to an enormous size and deal heavy damage to everyone in the area, as well as stunning them. However, once we started playing with that, it felt a little bit too vanilla, and it kind of felt too similar to Eternal Feast. So we made two simple changes. One of the changes we made was we changed the shape from a circle to a rectangle, and then we thought it was really cool, we added a pull before the stun went off. This is what we ended up today. Orphea manifests a set of crushing jaws at the targeted location, pulling enemies together, damaging and stunning them. Now, where Eternal Feast is great for providing disruption and damage in team fights, Crushing Jaws is great for setting up big plays and initiating on enemies. Orphea already had really cool combo moments in her base kit with Dread and Shadow Waltz and dashing in with Chomp, and we really wanted to enhance that combo and give Orphea a way to have some self-setup of her own. So I hope you all enjoyed this look at how we created a brand new hero born from the Nexus. Now that we have a base kit and heroics finalized, it's time to jump into talents. Alex is going to be talking you through some of her talents, builds, and play styles. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Nyman. I'm a senior live game designer on Heroes of the Storm. So while the rest of the team is busy designing heroes and creating the art and lore of the Nexus, my team focuses on the finer details of the gameplay of the heroes. And by that I mean we're in the corner playing the game all day long. But luckily they let us do that. So we playtest all of our heroes a ton, and Orphea was no different. Now, in the same way that Orphea's character and her visuals sort of revealed themselves over the course of her development, we found that as we continued to playtest Orphea, a lot of her gameplay styles began to solidify themselves. So I want to talk about just two of those today, as well as a few of the talents that support these different ways of playing the hero. So the first gameplay style I want to talk about is this concept of a ranged dancer. Now, this way of playing Orphea, she likes to rely on Shadow Waltz's dash to primarily jump away from enemy heroes, keeping them at distance, doing the majority of her damage with Shadow Waltz and Dread. Now, this is a great way to play Orphea if the opposing team doesn't have a lot of good ways to close the gap with you, and also they have a lot of heavy ways to disable you, and therefore you don't really ever want to get close to begin with. So if you're facing opponents like Arthas or Garrosh, it'd be a good way to play Orphea. Now, the other way to play Orphea that we found, or one of the other ways to play Orphea we found, is this aggressive monster play style. Now, this Orphea likes to jump forward with Shadow Waltz's dash, jumping into the close range of opponents, doing the majority of her damage from melee with her W ability, Chomp. Now, this is a great way to play Orphea if you can't really afford to kite opponents because they're just too mobile, or if they don't have a lot of crowd control to punish you if you do try to jump in close. So if you're facing opponents like Genji or Lucio or Zeratul, it's a great way to play Orphea here. Okay, so let's talk about a few of the talents that support the ranged dancer playstyle first, starting with On Point and Allegrissimo. So these are two talents that augment Shadow Waltz, giving it increased benefit if you hit with the end of the ability, kind of the end claw of your skill shot. If you do so, not only will you do more damage, but you'll greatly reduce the cooldown of Shadow Waltz, making you even more mobile, kind of letting you dance around the battlefield, keeping opponents at range, which is your goal. Now, this is a great way to play, but if opponents can close the gap, you suddenly can't get the benefits of these talents anymore. So if that's the case, it'd be great if there was another talent maybe that created distance between our opponents and ourselves. In that case, we brought back something from an earlier part of Orphea's kit during development, but this time as a talent the players can opt into. So the Backbiter talent makes it so the sheer force of chomping enemy heroes propels Orphea backwards, putting her at distance once again to get the benefits of a talent like On Point. So Orphea will be dancing around the battlefield once again with Backbiter, but this is all great and all, but what if we don't just want to use Chomp when we're playing this sort of ranged dancer playstyle to protect ourselves? Occasionally it'd be great if we could take a Chomp out of opponents from range. In that case, we have the Lurking Terror talent. So now this causes it so that after casting Dread, for a couple seconds after it explodes, you can activate your 1 key to cast Chomp from a distance. You'll see here in the video. So not only will this deal big damage on unsuspecting opponents, but it's actually a big surprise because you also still have your Chomp cooldown preserved. It's a separate cooldown entirely, meaning you can still get the benefits of the Backbiter talent we discussed previously. So all of this combines with this graceful dancer Orphea. She maneuvers around the battlefield, dodging enemy skill shots, and as long as she can continue to land her Shadow Waltz, she'll continue to be very maneuverable, being a headache for opponents to deal with on the battlefield. Okay, so that's one way to play Orphea. But what if you like to be a little more aggressive? All of us, every once in a while, like to let out a little bit of our teenage angst and give opponents a little bit of lip and maybe a lot of teeth, too. So we have the aggressive monster, might be right up your alley. So we can see here, Orphea's going to be very, very aggressive, jumping toward enemy heroes, taking a bite out of them, a chomp. So let's look at some of the talents that support that way to play the hero. First, we have the Insatiable talent. So you have a hunger, and you want to chomp people all the time. Insatiable talent is for you. This causes whenever you chomp an enemy hero, they reduce the cooldown of the ability to just 2 seconds, meaning you can chain these chomps together. Now this is great, and you can chain them all together for not only lots of damage, but also a good amount of trait stacks overflowing chaos that we're going to need since we're so aggressive. It's our way to keep ourselves alive. So there's also another talent called Abyssal Symbiosis that also synergizes with how often we're casting Chomp. This causes it so that now that casting a hitting Chomp on an enemy hero doesn't just give 1 stack of overflowing chaos, but the maximum, all 3. So as long as you can continue to weave basic attacks in between each of your Chomps, you'll be doing lots of damage as well as healing yourself a lot. Really important since we're so aggressive with this way of playing the character. Now, since we're chomping so much, we're in the middle of the enemy team fairly frequently too. So it'd be great if we had another talent that could take benefit from that. So here we have Invasive Miasma. Now you can activate Invasive Miasma, and after a short delay, or if it explodes, draining the life force of all nearby enemy heroes, dealing damage as well as healing Orphea, and giving even more overflowing chaos. That's why it's overflowing. It's just everywhere. So combine all this together, and you have this aggressive monster Orphea that jumps toward enemy heroes and is this chain-chomping machine. As long as she continues to land these chomps and gets her basic attacks off, she'll out-sustain her opponents. So that's it for Orphea. Just a second before we wrap up, we're going to take your questions. So if you have any now about our live game design, about our hero designs, or about the art and lore of the Nexus, please line up at one of the microphones and we'll answer anything we can. Now, we had a ton of fun creating Orphea. We hope you have just as much fun playing her. You can play her right now on the show floor, or if you don't have the opportunity to because you're not here, or maybe you just are busy, a lot of things going on this weekend, we get it, you can play her starting next week on the PTR. Thank you, everyone, for coming to our Hero Deep Dive panel on Orphea, the Heir of Ravencourt. See you in the Nexus, everybody.
Let's do this. I don't think we have too much time, so go ahead.
Hi, I just have a simple question. You keep referring to Orphea as the first hero of the Nexus. So does that mean that we're going to have more heroes of the Nexus?
I'll tackle that one. You know, Heroes very much for us is still a game where we want to bring in Blizzard fantasy. Like, that is our #1 priority, you know, bringing in heroes that we know the community knows and loves, and have those heroes across Blizzard games fight one another. Would we ever do this again? I'm not going to say no, but our priority, I think, is to get back to, get back to business, bringing in heroes we know the community wants. For us, like I said, I think this experience with Orphea was a great opportunity for us to shore up the identity of Heroes as a standalone game, and using Orphea as a great vehicle and sort of pinnacle for that effort. But we have a lot of heroes from other games that we want to bring in, so
all right,
we're going to be focusing on that. But I'm not going to say no. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Are you comfortable with how elaborate Orphea's animations and graphics are compared to ancient heroes such as Arthas and Uther, who look quite dated and old?
Arthas and Uther are, and a lot of our older characters are sort of points of pride for us because they were early in development. We had a lot less time because we had to make so many heroes. That said, we have heard lots of feedback, and we do know that they need some love. And it's a constant balance between the desire to go back and touch up these things. How long has Heroes been in development? Almost 5 years now. And the desire to create new, compelling content. And like we just said, we have like this long list of things we want to get through. So it's a balancing act between wanting to go back and also wanting to create more that's new.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi. I was wondering, I'm a Formula 1 main, and this kit is feeling a bit lackluster right now. Do you have any plans to update it or something about it?
I'm sorry, who are you? Who did you main?
Hillidan.
Illidan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Illidan, we know that we haven't seen him quite as much recently in the meta, and it's something we watch. Honestly, he's probably like a tiny bit away from just kind of becoming right in a mainstay again. And sometimes, so we could maybe go heavy-handed with kind of getting in there. But overall, we're pretty happy with the way the character plays. If anything, you might see maybe some small tuning adjustments here and there if we think we need to. But I think right now we're kind of on a wait and see because while it could be easy for us to kind of get too heavy-handed and really bring it, as soon as the character isn't seen for a couple of weeks in the HTC, we buff them and they're okay. We like to let the kind of meta figure itself out and sort of make developments on its own. So I won't say that we won't make any changes to Illidan, but he's right there where he's right in kind of the borderline where we're not sure we need to do anything quite yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Fantastic job first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Orphea is our first playable Nexus character.
Yeah.
But we've got lots of other characters that have been added, like the Gravekeeper, like Ka,
Absolutely.
who are very intimately tied to Battlegrounds. So I'm wondering, what's the challenge in creating a character tied to a map versus a character that we're going to play as? And do you think we'll see characters like Lady Nightshade as heroes someday?
It's a really great question. So it sounds like your question is, what is the challenge in terms of how we approach
like
Battlegrounds?
the design space.
Yeah, yeah.
There's different things you're taking in.
Yeah. I think we approach all of our characters with a great bit of care, and even the skins we choose, we approach with a great bit of care. I like to joke around and say everything is real. So I think even when we approach Battlegrounds, we think long and hard about, what is that voice on Braxis holdout, and what's the deal? Who is this person? So we spend a good amount of time on that. Obviously, it's going to differ from a hero that we're bringing into the game just because we put so much energy and so much time into that, and it's in the hands of our players. But we still take it very seriously. Will we see them manifest in the game? I mean, you do see Blackheart, right? He's one that we've seen. I don't think we're opposed to a future Battlegrounds doing similar things to what we've done previously, like Blackheart's Bay. But yeah, we don't have a lot to say in that regard at the moment. So yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's all the time we have today for questions. Sorry everybody didn't get a chance to. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Hero Deep Dive.
Oh,
Sorry.
thanks so much, guys. Sorry, I kind of talked too much.
Yeah.
Thank you for attending Heroes of the Storm Deep Dive. Up next, Voices of Overwatch.